my take was I never got to talk. My take was it was grand. It was black and white. There was no gray. There was no sense to be applied. I was evil from day one, and there's no communication. There's no transparency, and it just feels wrong because they can ask me for absolutely everything, downright to my shoe size, and I can't even ask them, why are you at my doorstep?
The testimonial endorsement guideline is not law. I mean, what does the FTC enforce? The FTC Act. That's the law. That's what gives them authority in Section 5 to go after, whether it's deceptive trade practices.
All right, coming live to you from his cabin on vacation for 4th of July weekend, it's time for us to talk about what the heck is going on with President Biden. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to talk about that, although that would be a fun conversation. What's going on with the Supreme Court? That's what we're talking about. So it seems to me like there have been some back-to-back rulings, maybe two, or at least one, that have been interesting. They have empowered the citizens, as I say. Now, I asked Greg, I texted him when it happened. I said, does this mean that I can now say whatever the hell I want and I won't get in trouble and it's full carte blanche? And he did say that that is not the case. The rules are still the rules. We still have to follow the rules. But some things have changed, and I don't really fully understand what they are. So Greg was kind enough to use his phone while he's on vacation. We struggled a lot to get the Wi-Fi to work. He has got a secret hideout in the mountains somewhere, which I definitely want to go to because it looks fun. But he got on. So 15, 20 minutes here, just real quick. Greg, this is an emergency episode. What's going on with the Supreme Court? Apparently there's been some rulings that favor us, the normal little old guys, the citizens. Can you talk through it, and how does it impact marketers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot because the Supreme Court just ended sessions last week, and so they generally reserve all of their final rulings until the end of the session. So remember, I clerked for the Nevada Supreme Court, which is the highest court in Nevada. The only place that it gets appealed to is U.S. Supreme Court. So familiar with the process. So over the last couple of weeks, several pretty impressive rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court. The first one had to do with a case with the Securities and Exchange Commission. On that one, what the ruling, basically the Supreme Court said that when bringing administrative actions, so the SEC brought an action, it was administrative action against a defendant. And that action, they basically said, hey, they've made a ruling internally. So an administrative action doesn't go into like the federal court system. It goes into an internal system that's handled by the Securities Exchange Commission or the Federal Trade Commission. And they hire their own judges to look at it independently, as you may argue. The U.S. Supreme Court said, if you're going to find disgorgement of assets and you're going to find significant liability, you cannot do that in an administration process. You have to do it in the courts to give full due process to the party in which you're suing, which is a pretty big ruling because a lot of the warning letters the FTC focuses on over the last couple of years were based upon administrative type actions from the late 70s and early 80s. And now they're trying to apply it to individuals and companies in a global aspect. But if they're restricted to having to force that issue in the courts, it really eliminates one of those, arrows in their quivers. So that's one case. Now, the second case is probably the case that you want to hear about, which is the Chevron case. So in the 1980s, there was a case, an EPA case, Environmental Protection Agency case against Chevron. And in that case, basically the holding of that case was that administrative and regulatory bodies could utilize rules and guidances to give to courts in order to determine liability under their respective acts, in this case, the EPA Act. And so how does that translate to what the Supreme Court did this last week? Well, this last week they said, no, each individual judge in which a case is brought in front of has the ability and discretion to look at the facts and circumstances of the case and determine those facts and circumstances and whether they violate the underlying act without a rule or guidance given by the regulatory agency, in this case, the EPA. So you may say, well, we're not doing anything environmental. We're offering an Amazon offer, affiliate offer, or we're doing, how to improve your biceps offer or something else. And how does this really apply to me? Well, it applies to you because the FTC testimonial and endorsement guidelines are one of these rules. This is a rule that's been promulgated by the FTC in an attempt to help direct courts and help direct their attention when judges are making determinations of whether or not companies have violated the Federal Trade Commission Act. And so, although the Chevron case is an EPA case, the overall understanding of the ruling by the Supreme Court in that case is that judges have independent ability to look at the law as the underlying act without relying upon rules and guidelines that have been issued by the regulatory agency, such as the Federal Trade Commission. So how does that relate to you in marketing? You may say, well, that's a great boon for us. We can go out and we can get aggressive with our testimonials and we can say whatever we want. We don't need the substantiation we've talked about. We don't need disclosures. We don't need any of this. And we're just going to do what we want. Well, hold fast. I can tell you in the cases that I've had with the Federal Trade Commission in court and other regulatory bodies in court, these rules and guidelines very rarely actually make an appearance except for when the FTC cites to them. Most of the time, the judges in the cases that I've been a part of have made rulings based upon their own discretion already. So the Supreme Court's ruling, it may not have a huge effect. We really don't know what it will as it pertains to advertising laws and the application of testimonials and endorsements. So what I would say to you, my best advice is, let's watch. Let's see what happens in the courts. If we have a whole bunch of courts that now are saying, FTC, you're wrong in your application of how testimonials and endorsements should be handled, we're not looking at the guidelines any longer, but we still think you're wrong, then we may be able to lighten our restrictions on what we do with testimonials. But if the reverse occurs, they go into court and cases are being heard in trial and court, and the judges are saying, we're finding liability irrespective of those rules and guidelines, then we'll know that really we can't be as aggressive as we want to. The problem with this ruling, the benefit is great. We can set aside these administrative rules and the internal rules these regulatory bodies have made. But the downside of that is it leaves it to the total and complete discretion of the individual judge. You have a bad sitting judge that interprets the law in a way that's very anti-commerce in the sense of the business, anti-business, pro-consumer. You're going to be set in a situation where it's going to be very difficult to appeal that decision based upon their findings of fact, because the U.S. Supreme Court says it's the discretion of the judges, which is a very low standard, very difficult to appeal on. So we're just going to, my advice to everybody is, before we get all giddy with this, I do think it's a benefit for marketers. I think it's going to lighten the load on some of the requirements eventually. But my best advice to clients is just wait. Let's see what happens with with kind of the fallout of the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Chevron, and see how it starts getting applied across for cases. It's not ironic that today there were like 4 announcements by the FTC today about different cases about AI and other cases dealing with marketing and business opportunity practices. There was a settlement just today on Arise Virtual Solutions, which is an AI company that they settled for $7 million for refunds for consumers based upon allegations of deceptive marketing practices. So it doesn't surprise me that it shouldn't surprise you if you see the FTC get immediately aggressive with some of this to try to calm the stores of Chevron. But Chevron doesn't just concern the Federal Trade Commission. It concerns the SEC, the EPA, the FCC, every regulatory agency out there who has utilized rules as a part of their structure to help win cases. It's going to negatively affect all those. So there's my soapbox. I'm sorry, Yannick, I kind of went off for a little bit.
No, I love it. It's interesting. The other thing people have to realize is court stuff takes for freaking ever, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, to actually see where this settles, it could be a year or 2 years where we actually have to see court cases go through. But there's something I heard between the lines that was really interesting, Greg, and it's one of the questions that has come up inside the community that I wanted to answer, that I wanted to get your answer for, is people are asking, hey, like this testimonial stuff, is this law? Or is this a rule? And I was like, because you get in trouble for violating it, but it's not congressionally passed. And so here's my take. You tell me if I'm right or wrong. What you're saying is basically the Supreme Court came and said, hey, you agencies can go off and make all the rules you want. That's not law. That's a suggestion. It's an aggressive suggestion that is up to the judge to look at and say, do they think do they think it's law? Do they think that it's in alignment enough with the power given to that three-letter agency to then have that considered as a law? Because it's been interesting. I haven't been able to answer that question because like the testimonials and endorsement guidelines, you never hear of it being referred as a law, because my understanding is only Congress and the executive branch Congress really can pass a law. So this kind of plays into that, whereas like those things aren't laws and they now have a little bit less authority, and the authority has kind of shifted more towards the independent judge. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the testimonial endorsement guideline is not law. I mean, what does the FTC enforce? The FTC Act. That's the law. That's what gives them authority in Section 5 to go after, whether it's deceptive trade practices. What the U.S. Supreme Court is saying is that the individual judge is going to look at the facts and circumstances of every case and determine on those facts and circumstances as to whether or not the company that's being sued by the Federal Trade Commission has violated the FTC Act. And whether it's Section 19 or Section 13 or whatever Section 5 that they apply it to, that's what it's saying. It's saying, Judge, you don't have to look at these rules that are promoted by the FTC because they're rules that have been internally issued, not by Congress or by judges. We have the FTC Act, and so you need to determine, looking at the facts and circumstances under your own discretion, whether or not the activity created the wrong net impression and deceived customers into buying a product and service that was different from what they were solicited to purchase. That's going to be the biggest issue. So this is a pretty seminal case, and there are several advocacy groups. I mean, huge big money in gas and oil went after this because of the effects that the EPA. I mean, imagine you have a federal government that's coming out and they're saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this and we're going to make a ruling for this and you have to abide by it. We didn't go to Congress. We didn't go to the courts. We just came up with our rules, and this becomes the law and you have to follow it. Well, I've thought that way for a number of years with the FTC and what they've ruled about earnings claims and a whole bunch of things. The FTC Act doesn't prohibit earnings claims, but the interpretation of the act and these rules and regulations, it makes it almost impossible to use somebody's testimonial as a testimonial without violating what their rules say. So that's why I've been so restrictive on giving advice about how you use testimonials. But with the cases that come down after this, we're going to get some clear discretion, because people are going to challenge it now. I don't want any of you to be the guinea pigs. Like, I would let somebody else has big money challenge it. Let the Facebooks of the world go in and fight this fight. And it's going to come down and we're going to have some clear understanding whether or not there is some latitude for us to go out there and be a little more aggressive with our marketing, or if we should still be pretty conservative. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to what is the net impression the client is getting when they're walking away from your advertisements. And if it's still that they're getting a Lamborghini when you're really selling them a Kia, then that's a big misrepresentation. We've got to make sure it aligns with the advertising and the end fulfillment product. So it's going to be an interesting case. But I mean, look at what the Supreme Court, I don't know if you guys looked at this. This was the last ruling they had, and this isn't political. Whoever's listening may disagree with what the court did with this, but the last ruling that came down on Friday had to do with the immunity of Trump on these and the president when they're holding office, right? But if you read Thomas's concurring opinion, he questions something that I thought was super interesting, which is the appointment of a special counsel. And there was an amicus brief, and if you're not familiar with what an amicus brief is, it's where you have an independent third party that files a brief in a case they have no bearing on. They just want to make sure that the court has the ability to consider all of the factors there, regardless of the underlying parties that are involved in the suit. And in that amicus brief that was considered by Thomas, the challenge was, how does the government appoint a private citizen to be special counsel? And it's very similar to what Thomas was talking about in this ruling with Chevron, which is, how does an independent regulatory agency set aside, and make regulatory rules without allowing Congress or judges to get involved? And so Thomas says in there is like, what constitutional law allows the government to appoint a special counsel in these cases? You can see with this court specifically, what they're looking at is, do the organizations and the regulatory bodies, whether it's the federal government or these agencies, have the authority to do what they're thinking? And if they don't, then they're going to challenge it. Whether it's in the Chevron case or in the immunity case with Trump, it's going to be challenged. Now, you may disagree with it and may think, like, I know there's a lot of pundits who are out there who are saying, well, this is a huge blow to liberty and we have a president can commit any type of crimes. I don't think that's what the court was saying. What the court was saying is it would be very difficult if you have a sitting president that may commit something that could be considered a crime, be held in criminal charges because you could be manipulated by a political system. And they didn't want to have that here. That doesn't mean that Congress can impeach the president that's sitting there if they think that they've done something wrong. That's still allowable. I mean, we had Andrew Johnson and Richard Nixon. But anyway, I know I went on a tangent a little bit, not on specific facts, but you've got to look at what the court is looking at when they're determining this. And so far in the last 3 years, this sitting court has issued huge blows to regulatory bodies, like with the AMG Capital Management case in April 2021, and now last week with the Chevron and the SEC cases, and even that immunity challenge case with Trump. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays down through the courts. We don't want to be that target. We want some of the big boys to take that on, pay for the fees for that, and then we'll silently sit back and watch and benefit and reap the rewards of their money in our marketing practices. So my advice isn't going to change. I think we stay true to the fashion. We try to have testimonials that abide by certain guidelines, the 4 principles we always talk about: releases, substantiation, typicality, and disclosures. But we're going to watch it. We're going to watch it, just like it's going to be very interesting with the rule that they made just a couple months ago about the non-competition clauses and whether or not they say that's really an addition or an analysis of Section 5 or a rule. And we're going to see that in the federal courts already. It's being challenged. So we're going to watch all of that and see what really happens.
That's awesome, man. Well, I was just going to say what you said before. I was going to say in the last few years, there seems to have been some correction of federal overreach. The 3-letter agencies getting a little bit onerous. So, I'm going to refrain my smile inside my mind so that I don't upset anybody else. Greg, you can smile. They won't sue you for being a lawyer, but they'll sue me. I don't want to irritate them. So guys, it doesn't really change anything. Okay, please don't start going out there gunslinging and doing whatever the hell you want. But it's a win. It's a win. I've always said this. I've repeatedly said this since actually even the first day. I've said I fully support and endorse the purpose behind which FTC, SEC, and all these 3-letter agencies have been created. We need it. Otherwise, people go amok, go crazy. I just think that now that I've got a dose of how they're run from within, there's a lot of power hungriness going on, and there's a lot of win at all costs going on, and there's just no like that perspective of justice, which is like the actual purpose of justice. It's to protect and serve. It's become more of like to win and win, and that just leaves a negative taste in my mouth as an American citizen. So after having been through the whole thing, I think that was my take. My take was I never had a chance. Like my take was I never got to talk. My take was it was grand. It was black and white. There was no gray. There was no sense to be applied. I was evil from day one, and there was, I don't know. That's how it felt. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea. It's not like I can have a beer with them and go talk about it and go debrief. It's not like I'm ever going to be told why they came after me, what really irritated them. There's no communication. There's no transparency. And it just feels wrong because they can ask me for absolutely everything, down right to my shoe size, and I can't even ask them, why are you at my doorstep? That's not right. Like, it doesn't even work like that with the police. The police can't, enter your home or enter your vehicle without a search warrant and without this. Like, it just felt like getting a little bit crazy out here with these agencies, and they're stretching and stretching and stretching. And I'm just excited to see that the system is working, that there is a checks and balances, and we'll see how it plays out. Last question while I have you. Were you able to, Greg, non-political question, okay? It's not a political question, but were you able to finish watching the debate? Did you
No,
get through the whole thing?
no. I lasted, and I don't care who you're for, liberal, conservative. That's hard to watch, and
Yeah.
having a mother who just died of dementia in February, I watched Biden up there. He had signs that my mom had
Did you?
about losing train of thought and stuff. It worried me as a
Hey, did you see?
citizen.
Well, listen. At this point, I'm sorry to say this, and I'm not trying to get us both canceled, but I do kind of care if you're leaning towards one or the other, because one has some serious inability to run the country. The other one, look, people are like, he's going to drive us to nuclear war. Trump didn't. He didn't. Like, he has 4 years of actual track record. He was mean on tweets. I get it. He is not presidential. He can be nasty. I get all that. But, like, Biden doesn't, like, anyways. So that was concerning to me. I could totally understand someone not wanting to vote for Trump and being a Biden supporter, even if I don't believe in all the things. But, like, that, I'm like, that's got to be a concern. You can't, because it's physically a problem. Did you see the leaked video, though, Greg, of after the debate and after the cameras cut, of them walking off the stage?
No. What happened?
That was the worst of the whole thing. Guys, if you're watching this, go Google it. Greg, I'll find the video and send it to you. It's very hard to find. They've been getting rid of it. So Trump just turns and walks off the stage like any normal person would. You just walk off. If you're on stage, Greg, and you're finished talking, you walk off the stage, right? Exit left stage. Biden stood there looking around, confused. Jill walked on, grabbed him by the hand, and slowly guided him. And he wanted to go down the steps to go say hi to the CNN anchors or shake their hand. He was struggling to get down the steps, and then he inched his way towards the front to go shake their hands. He had to be guided and led by Jill. It was petrifying to watch. It was petrifying. That was the most scary part for me. I didn't actually see this until 2 or 3 days post the debate. And I remember the debate kind of became a joke because they're both arguing about their stupid golf handicap. I was like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Shut the hell up. But that is sneered in my mind. I can't get that sight out of my eyes. He was physically being held by his wife. He did not know where to go. He had no idea where to go after that debate was over. Guys, anyways. So, glad to see that we got...
Real quick,
yes.
I'm going to we've got to talk about this Arise case. So I'm teeing up for our next podcast because that case is interesting because this is like the third case that I've seen in a row where the FTC is coming after this business opportunity law and requiring mandatory disclosures. Plus, there's a concurrent action between the Department of Labor and the state of Florida because of improper characterization of contractors over employees. And that's it. They call it a misclassification of independent contractors when both the U.S. Department of Labor and the Southern District of Florida are saying that they should have been employees. So if you guys have a whole bunch of contractors that are out there and you have control and ownership of them, and you treat them like employees, you should be scared about this because in January of this year, the U.S. Department of Labor came out with those new standards about whether or not your contractors, if they're predominantly making money from you, they're employees. They're now enforcing it, and they're doing it so with Arise. That case is interesting for me, not just from a federal regulatory standpoint from the FTC, but also because of the Department of Labor issues.
We gotta definitely talk about it.
Bonus. Yeah, this is my tee-up. Isn't that what they call it? It's a tee-up.
It's a tee-up. I'm frustrated because they're making it so difficult to do business in this country, man. It's really hard on us entrepreneurs already. I mean it. This is just a moment of truth from me coming to those who are watching, if anyone is at all. You guys are making it really hard to run a business here. The regulations, the regulatory fines, the rules, I can't keep up. Like the contractor versus employee. So you know what's going to happen? My next 3 positions, they're offshore. I'm going to hire people offshore. I don't know what else to say. First of all, I can't afford it as it is in the U.S. And then on top of that, you got all the taxes, the Social Securities, the this, the that. And then if you bring them as an employee, there's all these additional rules. God forbid they suck and don't do the work and you have to get rid of them. You got to drag your feet. You open yourself up to wrongful termination. You open yourself up to all these other rules that have been brought into the picture. you're hurting yourself. You gotta stop. Like, we gotta deregulate a little bit. Jesus, man, guys, calm down. And it's showing in the economy. It's showing in. Okay, sorry, I'm ranting. Anyways, we'll talk about the case, and I'll rant about it at that time.
Good. We're going to talk about advice, and we're going to go in and talk about this. But, anyway, have a good weekend.
You too, man. Happy 4th. Happy 4th. Have a great one. Stay safe. Say hi to the family. We'll see you on the next episode. To the rest of you guys, keep subscribing, keep listening. We'll keep bringing you stuff as we can. Greg and I agreed we're going to try to do a little bit more of these like emergency podcasts where we like disrupt our flow. And even if it's not the best like look and feel or whatever, we're just trying to get the content out to you. The book is doing great. Compliant Academy is about to launch full-time again. Complyly is about to open its doors, so we're not going to shut down anymore. The whole shebang is on. I have 2 more front-end funnels that we're working on. I even have a challenge I'm going to pitch Greg. He doesn't even know about. It's going to be a challenge we do, a very low-cost challenge to help marketers get compliant. I got all kinds of stuff lined up in our alley, so we're super excited to bring it all to you. Get ready to get compliant. Compliance revolution is in full gear. Love you all. Greg, thank you very much. And everybody, as I say, when life pushes you, stand straight, smile, and push it the heck back. And if you want to be a giant, you got to go compliant. See you later. Bye.